Today we're going to be learning Pesachim Daf Kufay. This is the Daf for Shabbat. Today's Daf is dedicated by Caroline Ben Ari in memory of her beloved mother, Daphne Rhodes, Daphne Devora Bat Avram Dechana on her 4th Yurtzeit. Okay, we're going to start now from the top of the page, from the 4th line. Rav Chananya Bar Shlemya. Rav Chananya Bar Shlemya v'Talmidei de Rav Havuyatve b'Seudata. They were sitting in a meal. V'kai alayhu Rav Hamnuna Saba, and Rav Hamnuna Saba was sitting with them. Amrule zil chaze imekadesh yoma. So they were having a meal. We're back to our issues of eating on Friday afternoon. They were having a meal on Friday afternoon, and he said to them, "Go see if it got dark out." Right? Maybe they didn't have windows. Right? He asked them to go and check what's happening. Nafsik v'nikvei l'shabta, and then we'll go and switch our meal. We'll stop, we'll bench, and then we'll go eat another. We'll eat our Shabbat meal. Amar lehu lo tzrichitu shabta kava nafsha. He said to them, we don't need to. Shabbat has determined that it's Shabbat, meaning Shabbat comes in and it's automatically Shabbat. We don't need to set aside, change our meal. No, it's Shabbat. It's fine. We're right here. Okay. If you look, just to give you a sense, so Rashbam says, right, Lo tzrichitu lafsik b'akirat shulchan. You don't need to uproot the table. Remember, take the table off. To differentiate this meal. Because Shabbat is kovat the Seudah. Okay, we're going to learn in a minute what this exactly is. And Rashbam says, he adds something. He says, since now we're not allowed to eat until we make Kiddush, there's no bigger break than that. And that already, by just stopping, making Kiddush, already that makes it into our Shabbat meal. In other words, you don't need to bench in the middle and make a new meal. No, just designating, oh, we're going to make Kiddush now, and you put them up on the table, which we saw a few days ago. That already is significant to make a break. How do we know this? Now we're on a totally different topic. Now we're talking about maaser. When is food obligated in maaser? Generally, we say when there's gemar malacha. You have crops out in the field. When you finish doing everything that you're supposed to do with them in order to gather them and then bring them into your house. So when you bring them into your house, that's when it's considered you've done all the work in the field, it's finished, and you're obligated in maaser. However, the rabbis, and then what it basically means is before that, you're actually allowed to eat. Like if you're picking fruits outside in your backyard, you're allowed to eat them outside. However, that's only in the case, the rabbis instituted, it's only if you didn't make a big meal outside. But if you were to make a meal out of your fruit and you eat a lot of them, it's again what we keep differentiating between arai and keva. Arai is temporary, keva is permanent. So if you're going to make it a serious meal, then already you're going to be obligated by rabbinic law. Now, what does this mean about Shabbat kovat l'maaser? There's an assumption that when you eat on Shabbat, even if you eat achilat arai, just a snack, since it's part of the mitzvah of oneg Shabbat, that makes it a significant eating, which means that anything you eat on Shabbat, it's interesting if you think about it, right? Any snack you have is significant. I don't know if it affects your weight or anything, right? People say you don't gain weight on Shabbat, right? Not in terms of weight, obviously, but we mean in terms of significance of a meal, it's considered significant. So according to this, what does it mean Shabbat kovat l'maaser? When do we determine that it's Shabbat in terms of what you're eating, and whether you're eating determines that it's a meal? Whether, and again, where we're going to call even a snack achilat keva, which means you're going to be obligated to take trumot and maasrot on them. So that's Shabbat kovat l'maaser. Okay, so the moment Shabbat comes in, that already determines that now whatever you eat in the hours that it's technically Shabbat, any kind of meal will be considered significant in terms of your obligation of maaser. Okay, so therefore you basically can't, now what's the issue? You can't take trumot and maasrot on Shabbat. Again, this is not our issue, but it's an issue that comes out of this. Therefore, if you want to eat something that's outside, that wasn't brought in your house, that didn't have gemar malacha yet, it wasn't finished, you couldn't eat it on Shabbat if you're just snacking, because unless you took trumot and maasrot from before Shabbat, because you can't take trumot and maasrot on Shabbat. So now let's go back to Rev's statement. Kashem Shabbat kovat l'maaser, kach Shabbat kovat l'kiddush. It's the same thing. As soon as Shabbat comes in, it's now time for Kiddush. And therefore, again, there's no, once Kiddush hits, you can't eat anymore. Therefore, you're Prois Mapa, you're Mekadesh. At that point, you've made a separation. You don't need to bench and have a new meal. Sever Mine. Now, when they heard this, they inferred the following. Again, Sever Mine means they're going to infer something, but it's going to be rejected. They thought that Kihecha de Kavala Kiddush, and we actually referenced this a few dapim ago, Kach Kavala Havdalah. Just like it determines that now it's Kiddush time and it's Shabbat, likewise, the same thing when Shabbat ends. And then when you're eating, right, again, you immediately need to make Havdalah because already, immediately, it's now considered Chol, even if you're in the middle of a meal, your meal is not considered a meal of Shabbat anymore. And therefore, you have to stop what you're doing, right, and make Havdalah. So now, right, Rashi, let's just read in the Rashbam. She'im yoshvim, dibor matchil kovat lahavdalah, it determines for Havdalah. Kach yetziata kovat lahavdalah, so when it leaves, it determines. She'im yoshvim ala shulchan b'chashecha b'motzei Shabbat, asur lechol ad she'avdilu. Just like you can't eat when Kiddush starts until when the obligation for Kiddush, until you make Kiddush. Likewise, you can't eat until Havdalah is said. And therefore, so again, he continues, and even if you haven't finished eating, again, you have to stop immediately, put a cloth out. Okay, you have to wonder why you need a cloth here. It's not the same issue as Shabbat. And therefore, you have to say Havdalah. So now, so they assumed it was the same. Amar lahu Rav Amram says, no, hachi amarav. L'kiddush kovat v'lo lahavdalah kovat. No, it's only for Kiddush. It's not for Havdalah. And now, and this is what Rav said. If you remember, we saw this the other day and we said, why? Right? They seem to say Havdalah was just like Kiddush, but then we said, oh, well, the reason is because Rav doesn't say so. And that's why if we're eating a big Sudah Shlishi, we don't stop in the middle as soon as Havdalah comes. And we're going to see the reason why soon. Now, this is true about not having to stop a meal if Havdalah comes while you're in the middle of a meal. But you can't start a meal once your obligation of Havdalah kicks in. And this is why people are careful not to eat before Havdalah. And by the way, when they said you don't have to stop your meal, but it's not true about shtia. If you're drinking, meaning you're not having a full meal, you're just drinking, then you do have to stop and you have to make Havdalah. Only if you're in the middle of a meal with not just drinking. And shtia also, when we say specifically this is for drinking, and now the Rashbam says that what we mean here is the fact that drinking, shtia lo, you have to stop and you also can't start drinking. Now, so they're focusing on the fact that you can't start a meal, you also can't start drinking anything. However, that limitation is only only with wine or beer. But there's no problem to drink water before Havdalah. So if you're supposed to make Havdalah and nobody's come home yet from wherever, you're waiting around for people to come home to make Havdalah, you can drink water, but you can't eat other foods. This, by the way, there's a distinction. Halachically, for Kiddush in the morning, drinking water, or Kiddush when Shabbat starts, drinking water is actually more of an issue. But when it comes to Havdalah, we're not strict about it. And this, by the way, disagrees with Rav Huna. He saw someone drinking water before Havdalah. Are you not worried about askara? Askara was a disease that they were very concerned about. Some people think it's diphtheria. There's different theories about what it is. But either which way, he's saying, aren't you worried about getting diphtheria? Meaning that was known to be a punishment that one gets if one drinks water before Havdalah. And here we're going to see the Braita in the name of Rabbi Akiva was passed down. You will die by askara, they told people, if you drink a little before Havdalah. We've seen sources like this before. Again, it's always a little bit shocking. Well, you're going to die of some disease because you drank water before Havdalah. It seems a bit extreme, but it was a way of telling people take this seriously, right? That's how it was, scare tactics. So what do they answer? They say, right, this wasn't a question. This was just saying Rav Huna disagrees. In other words, what we just saw said, you can't drink water. You just can't drink wine or beer. But this opinion, Rav Huna thinks you can't even drink water. The rabbis in the house of Rav Ashi weren't careful about water, meaning they have no problem drinking water. Now we're going to ask a different question. Let's say for some reason you forgot to make Kiddush on Friday night. Can you make Kiddush all throughout the rest of the day? Okay, meaning the next day. So, Amar le, Mida Amir b'nei Rabbi Chia. Okay, they asked Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak answers. From the fact that the sons of Rabbi Chia said, Misha lo hivdil b'motzei Shabbat mavdil v'holech kol Shabbat kulo. If you didn't make Havdalah Saturday night, this is a little bit more common than not making Kiddush. It's hard to imagine not making Kiddush, although obviously in rare situations one could see why you wouldn't make Kiddush. But Havdalah is more common. You could have just forgotten somehow to make Havdalah. And what do you do if you forgot to make Havdalah? Right? One time it happened to my daughter. She was in the army on a night shift, Saturday night, and she just didn't remember to make Havdalah, or maybe couldn't have made Havdalah. She came home the next day, and only later at night did she remember, oh, I never made Havdalah the night before. So Havdalah, we know you can make Havdalah until Tuesday, generally we say, because that's considered the days are associated, the days before Shabbat and the days after Shabbat. So until Tuesday is after Shabbat. So what do they say? He says, if you didn't make Havdalah, Motzei Shabbat, you can do it all through the rest of the week. So we should say the exact same thing for Kiddush on Shabbat. If you didn't make it Friday night, you could do it the rest of the day. By the way, I just want to point out that this is both the beginning of what we saw today about trying to say it's the same rules for Kiddush and Havdalah in terms of whether you have to Pores Mapal Mekadesh or not. So we tried to compare what they thought they were similar. In the end, they said they aren't. Here also, he seems to say they're similar. There's this connection, and we're going to see soon in the Gemara, I think it's in tomorrow's daf, about this connection between Kiddush and Havdalah. I think it's in tomorrow. I forget exactly where it is, but it's coming up about the idea that Shabbat is what brings in the Shabbat, Kiddush at Friday night, and Kiddush and Havdalah after brings out the Shabbat. So there's always this interplay between how much do we compare them and how much do we not. We're going to see in a few more days, right, what you can use for Kiddush and what you can use for Havdalah, and are they the same or are they different? And we'll see the Gemara there. So it seems to be something that's connecting all these sugyot, this connection between what we're seeing. How much are they similar? How are they different? So he seems to think they're the same. The Gemara is going to raise several questions on him. Eitive. So now Eitive means we're going to bring a question against you from a Tannaitic source. Leilei Shabbat v'leilei Yom Tov yesh b'hem kedusha lakosh v'yesh b'hem hazkara b'berkat hamazon. So the evenings of Shabbat and Yom Tov, you bake Kiddush on the cup, and you mention it in Berkat Hamazon, meaning you say Ritzei V'achalitzenu, that it's Shabbat today. Shabbat v'Yom Tov ein b'hem kedusha lakos v'yesh b'hem hazkara b'berkat hamazon. Okay, so that was the nights of. The nights have Kiddush, we said, and they have invention. The days, ein b'hem kedusha lakos, you don't have Kiddush on a cup. We're going to see this, that like, Kiddush on a cup was not something that people necessarily did on Shabbat day, even though now we do. V'yesh b'hem hazkara b'berkat hamazon. And they do have mention, though, in Berkat Hamazon. Now, what does this have to do with us? Well, Isa kadatach mishalo kadesh be'erev Shabbat mekadesh v'olech kol yom kulo. Then Shabbat v'Yom Tov nami mishkach alad yesh b'hem kedusha lakos. If you can make up Kiddush from Friday night on Shabbos day, then you see that it does have Kiddush. You do have Kiddush during the day. So what do they answer? Well, that's only if you're stuck and you forgot to make Kiddush. De'ilo kaddish me'orta mikdash l'machal, right? But that's not. Amar le de'ilo katane. In other words, what do you mean? That was saying yesh b'hem kedusha lakos. In which case, that if you ilo kaddish me'orta mekadesh l'machar, that if you didn't make Kiddush at night, you'll have it tomorrow. But that's only if. That's a big if. That's not in general. So therefore, don't question me about this. Even though it's true that it says you don't generally have Kiddush during the day on Shabbat, it doesn't mean that in this case you would do it. It doesn't contradict what I'm saying. My case is just a unique case, and that was talking about a general case. Second question. Kvod yom ukvod laila. Let's say you don't have enough for everything. You don't have enough money. So if you don't have enough wine or enough food, what should you do? Kvod yom kodem. Okay, if you don't have enough food, you should keep your food for the day. But if you only have one cup, in other words, when it comes to food, we'd rather you have more food during the day. But if you only have one cup, kiddush hayom, omer alav kiddush hayom, you should say kiddush. Why? Friday night. מפני שקידוש היום קודם לכבוד יום. Okay, and some people even say uchvod laila. In other words, it's in parentheses there, but the idea is wine is more important than the meal. So make sure you have your wine. This is similar to what we saw in the beginning about the 4 kosot. Make sure you have that even from the tamchui, right? Better that than food. It's more important. So you should definitely have kiddush of the night, right? That's more important. Lichvod yom. But wait, if you want to have kvod yom, and you want to have also, let's say you don't have enough, and all you have is for wine for one meal. So why don't you, since kvod yom is more important, having a meal during the day is more important than having a meal at night. But kiddush at night is more important than having kiddush during the day. Why don't we say, push off your kiddush at night? If kiddush in the day is a thing, push off kiddush at night, have it during, if what you're saying, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, is that if you don't do kiddush at night, you can make it up during the day. So why don't you just make it up the next day? And then we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You have kavod in that during the day, and you make your kiddush, because who cares if you make your kiddush late? And that's, again, yes, it's ideal, but anyway, since you could do it the next day, why don't you just do it the next day? You're obviously in a less than ideal situation because you don't have enough. So that's what they say, v'im ita, right? So if you can, like do what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, you should leave it liv shekav machar v'lavi beitarte, and do two in one at once. So Amalei chaviva mitzvah b'sha'ata. A mitzvah in its proper time is the best. And why is kiddush in its proper time at night? Because you're supposed to sanctify kiddush, sanctify the day by saying kiddush. It's the Choret Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. We remember the day of Shabbat. Biknisato, when it comes in. We don't want to push that off till tomorrow. We'd rather do the mitzvah in its proper time. This is a very famous line. Chaviva mitzvah b'sha'ata. You always want to do a mitzvah in its ideal time. And that's why. Even though if you're stuck and you forgot, so you can still do it the next day according to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So that's his answer. So now they further ask a question on him, and you're going to see how frustrated he gets in a minute. Do we really say that? It says in a Braita, if you walk into your house Saturday night, presumably, we'll see later, they're going to assume you're coming from shul. Now, you want to make Havdalah. Okay, this is, what do? You make a bracha on the wine. This is how we do Havdalah. Then you make a bracha on the light, which we do third, but they do second here. Va'ala b'samim, and on the b'samim, we're going to see later that this is Beit Shammai's opinion, that we saw it already 2 days ago. V'achar kachomer Havdalah ala kos. And then you say Havdalah on a cup of wine, which is the bracha hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol, etc., that we discussed. But if you only have 1 cup, what should you do? And you want to also eat a meal after Shabbat. We actually saw this source a few dapim ago on Daf Kuf Bet. So what do? You leave it till after you eat your night meal, even though it's kind of funny because we said you're not supposed to eat before Havdalah. But if you only have 1 cup, we allow you to eat before Havdalah. And then on that 1 cup, you make all your blessings, right? You include Birkat Hamazon and you include Havdalah, which has all the Havdalah aspects to it. Now, what do you notice here? We don't say, oh, best to do the mitzvah in its appropriate time as soon as Shabbat ends. So what are you talking about, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, about this? So I just want to review what we're up to before we see the reaction of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. We had this question on the previous page of Ravina, who asked Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, if you didn't make Kiddush on Erev Shabbat, can you do it the next day? He said, yes, you can, to which they asked him a number of questions. First, they asked from the Braita that said, on Melei Shabbat, right, on Yom Shabbat, right, doesn't have Kiddush. And then we said, well, if it doesn't have Kiddush, what do you mean? Then how can you say, you can say Kiddush? And then he said, oh, no, that's only if you don't. And then we said, what if you only have 1 cup? And then we said, well, that's only, right, that's we'd rather you do the mitzvah at its appropriate time. Now they ask him why we see this other source where you don't have to do a mitzvah at its appropriate time, because we allow you to push off Havdalah in order to make the bracha Birkat Hamazon also on a cup. So comes, you can see, and I wanted to set this up so you understand why he responds this way. Amar le, ana lo chakima'a ana, velo choza'a ana, velo yechida ana, ela gemarna v'sadarna ana. He says a very big line. He says, listen, I'm not a Talmid Chacham. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not a chozai. I'm not a navi, a prophet. I'm not a yechidah, like a 1 in a million. Okay. I'm just telling you what I learned. This is what people told me. In other words, why are you bothering me? This is what I learned. And in fact, in the Beit Midrash, they teach like this. So why are you bothering me so much? So now they say, Shane lam beni yule yoma. So now he explains the difference. Okay, it seems like he's explaining this, that it's Shane lam ben yule yoma la afuke yoma. He says, you're asking me about Havdalah. Why don't we make Havdalah right away? If Chaviva mitzvah b'sha'at well, I'll tell you why. And this goes back to, again, what I said before. How similar is Havdalah to Kiddush? When we bring the day in, we want to do Chaviva mitzvah b'sha'at, but when we have Shabbat leave, we don't want to rush it out. We don't mind pushing off Havdalah. Yule Yoma, bringing in the day, the earlier the better. We want to bring in Shabbat. We want to say how important it is to us. But Afuke Yoma, to have Shabbat leave, we don't want it to look like a burden, right? I always think about those people. Some people, when Shabbat ends, they don't want Shabbat to end. They just want Shabbat to last. And other people are anxious and waiting for the second Shabbat's going to be over so they can take care of whatever they need to take care of, or do what they want to do, or whatever it is. So they're saying you shouldn't be rushing out of Shabbat, and that's why Havdalah we can push off, but Kiddush we don't push off. And therefore, it doesn't go against what I said, that if you can't do Kiddush Friday night, you could still do it Shabbos day, but yet we still, if you only have 1 cup, we don't push it off to the day, so you can have your nice meal during the day. No, we keep it at night because we'd rather do Kiddush. The first thing we want to bring in Shabbat as soon as Shabbat comes in, and therefore we want to do the mitzvah at its appropriate time of bringing in Shabbat. Now the last thing for today is Shema Mina Mia Matnita Tamne. We're going to learn 8 things from this braita, 8 halachot, and here we go. Usually it's Shema Mina Tlat. We learn 3 things. This we're going to learn 8 different halachot. So remember, the braita, I'll just read it again so you remember. Hanichnas lebeito, it's on about the 5th line of the Gemara here. Hanichnas lebeito b'motzei Shabbat, if you come home on Motzei Shabbat, mevarech ala yayin va'ala ba'or va'ala b'samim. Notice the order, we're going to get to this later, right? The wine, the candle, the b'samim, and then achar kach omer havdalah ala kos. And im ein lo ela kos echad, if you don't only have 1 cup, then you leave it till after the meal. So here goes our list. Shema Mina, hamavdil b'tfilah, tzarich sheyavdil lakos. Like I said in the beginning when we read it, we're assuming you're coming home from shul. So if you're already davening in shul, now why would that be relevant? Because in davening you say atachon antanu, which is a bracha of havdalah. Even though you already said that, you still need to do havdalah on a cup of wine. Ushma Mina, and secondly, you can learn bracha te'una kos, that a bracha, meaning Birkat Hamazon, should be done with a cup of wine. Now, what they mean here is it's a chovah, it's obligatory to do this. How do we know? Because otherwise we wouldn't allow you. Remember, it's forbidden to eat when Havdalah is upon you. The fact that we allow it shows that they believe that Birkat Hamazon, having it with a cup of wine, is obligatory. The author of this braita says this. Now, because this is something that we don't generally do, only sometimes, I wanted to just show you in the Shulchan Aruch the Psikat Halacha about this. What is said lahalacha. So in Orach Chaim Kuf Pei Bet it says, Yesh omrim sheberkat hamazon te'una kos. Okay, some people say you need to have a cup. That's what we saw here. Afilu biyachid, even if you're by yourself. Some people say it's only if you're with 3 people. We'll get to that. V'tzarich lachzor alav. Okay, meaning you have to find yourself a cup of wine. V'lo yochal im ein lo kos levarech alav, and you shouldn't even eat if you don't have a cup. Im hu mitzapeh ve'efshar sheyeh lo. Okay, I'm not going to get into all those details. Then he says, okay, even if it's 2 people. Some people say, and here it's going to list a bunch of different opinions. Maybe it's only if you have 3 people and you have a zimun. And some people say you don't even need a cup even with your 3 people. And that's what we generally go by nowadays. So the author of this braita clearly thought that you have to have 3. You have to have a cup. Ushma mina, kos shabrachat tzarich shi'ur. Not only that, what do you learn? You need a certain amount, because if you didn't need a certain requisite amount, the requisite amount is, when it comes to wine, it's usually a revi'i, it's a 1/4 of a log. But if you didn't need wine, then if you didn't need a certain amount, then if you only have 1 cup, what does it mean you only have 1 cup? You could split into 2 and have a little bit in each cup, and then you can do both. So this must mean that you need a certain amount of wine. What else does it imply? It must mean he has to drink it. because if he, right, why drink it? Because, right, someone needs to drink it. Second, right, because the idea here is if he didn't drink it, then you could have just left the cup for later. You can make a bracha on the wine, Havdalah. Don't drink it. Leave it for later. Again, it's hard for you to imagine you made a bracha and not drink. The assumption is maybe there was a thought that you wouldn't have to drink the wine. Leave it, right? You make a bracha on a cup. You don't necessarily drink it, and then you leave it for later, and then you do Birkat Hamazon on it. Next thing, Ushma mina ta'amo pgamo. Now, what's the issue? Why don't you just take a little bit to taste and leave the rest of it? But that's what we call a kos pagum. And you could see why that would be bad, because it's like leftover cup. You don't want to make kiddush on the leftovers of something that you drank from. It's not appropriate. So that's another thing. Ushma mina ta'am mavdil. Okay, and then we learned that someone who, right, ta'am mavdil means that if you ate food, you can still make kiddush. There's an opinion that we're going to see on the next page, which says, on the next daf, that says that if you ate food, you're not allowed to make Havdalah that day. So here you see you can, because you ate your meal and then you made Havdalah after. Ushma mina, we're getting near the end here. Omer shtei kedushot al kos echad. Saw this before, that maybe ein osim mitzvot chavilot, and you can't do Birkat Hamazon and kiddush on the same cup. But according to this opinion, you can, because it's not a problem, right? You're doing both kiddush and Birkat Hamazon, Havdalah and Birkat Hamazon on the same cup. Ushma mina Beit Shammai va'aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. And in terms of the order, this is Beit Shammai according to Rabbi Yehuda's explanation. Again, if you remember, there was a machloket there. According to Rabbi Meir, everyone agrees you start with the candle and you end with Havdalah, and the switch is between Birkat Hamazon and Bisamim, which comes first. According to Rabbi Yehuda, everyone agrees Birkat Hamazon comes first, Havdalah comes last, and the question is the order of the Ner and the Bisamim. So this order that appears here, which is wine, candle, Bisamim, Havdalah, would match Beit Shammai according to Rabbi Yehuda. So again, we said this Bright has certain unique opinions that we don't necessarily find everywhere. And we'll end with that for today. Have a Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov. We will pick up from here on Sunday.